What's up, y'all, and welcome to Carefree Black Nerd. I am the Carefree Black Nerd myself, Rain Coleman, and I'm discussing all things representation in comics and related media. And today we're getting into Riverdale. So, Riverdale season 7, the final season, is going to premiere on CW on March 29th. That's the Wednesday, next Wednesday, actually. And I have some feelings, I have some thoughts. Now, Archie Comics, at this point, everyone should know who Archie is. He is a staple. I remember reading the Archie comics, Archie Digest at the grocery stores when I was a kid. I have so many of them. I'm sure there's some like floating around here in one of my longer short boxes filled with comics. But my history with Riverdale is a interesting one. So I started my podcast many moons ago, and of course, I'm talking about representation, comics, related media, good storylines, comic books, and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, I turn on the TV and I see an ad for a gritty, dark reboot of Archie Comics. And it was so interesting that I was like, oh, yeah, I got to watch this. That was the first show, the first series I had ever reviewed on my podcast, like a weekly, this is my check in, thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and whatnot. And I loved it. That first season, chef's kiss. They could do no wrong. Things got a little different, but I will say I had a really good time when this show first started. And that was where I sunk my teeth into reviewing, doing live tweets, getting the promotional stuff out. Like that series is where I really kind of hit the ground running in my freshman, sophomore seasons of this podcast. So that is my very brief history with Riverdale. But we're going to get into this trailer for season 7, the final season. Let's see what they got going on.
The year is 1955.
All of us, we were all sent back in time. We need to get back 67 years ago, but in the future.
The future.
None of them remember our lives from before we became teenagers again.
Jughead, we're juniors in high school. Life's good. Why would we want to go back?
Now, with this show, so one of the reasons I fell off is that this show was like bonkers off the wall, doing some of everything. But what I do like about this 7th season is that we're returning to basics, but in a meta way, getting back to that old school Archie Digest style. And I'm enjoying that. And I'm actually looking forward to that. The only thing, though, that gives me pause is this show will do whatever they want whenever they want. So we may be here in 1950, whatever, and it may feel like it's going to be for a full season, but we might turn around and they're only there for like the first 3 episodes because you never know with this show. So I'm excited for this portion, but I am a little bit nervous if I'm going to be quite honest. Well,
Things are different here in Riverdale.
I want Kevin to want me.
Yes, I am that Veronica Lodge.
She's a celebrity from Hollywood.
Wait a minute. You and Cheryl are getting married?
Come along, Archie.
Say no more.
Mrs. Andrews.
We need to get the hell out of 1955.
We are not from the future.
Kevin, it's time to start cramming.
Less full sex, did you say?
Is that like an orgy?
These sorts of things don't happen in Riverdale.
Oh, Ethel. Okay, Ethel's back. I'm going to say if Riverdale doesn't do anything else, they're going to give you sex, they're going to give you drama, and they're going to give you a murderer. They're going to give you a murder, and those are the tenements, the tent poles, the bricks that make up the Riverdale castle. But having Ethel back is so interesting. But what I want to know is, will Jason be back? We know Jason died in before season 1 started. His murder was a huge part of season 1. I think really all seasons, anything pertaining to Cheryl. But I wonder if we're getting if we're getting him back, and if so, in what capacity? Because is this simply traveling through time, or is it traveling through time like an alternate universe? So I don't know. I'm interested in that, but seeing Ethel covered in blood, none of this feels out of the norm. They could literally put Scooby Doo in here and also have some Avengers run through, and I'd be like, yeah, that tracks. That's Riverdale.
Trust me, nothing is ever gonna be the same again.
Awesome. I mean, swell.
All right, y'all. So Riverdale is back for season 7, the final season, and I am pretty excited for it. With Riverdale, the show proper, I fell off at about season 3 or 4, I think. And honestly, I think that's about right. It was about the time when Archie went to what they called like a young boys group home situation, but it was like quite literally a jail, a prison with a fight club, and all of these grown men in their 30s and 40s were claiming to be like 12 to like 16 years old. The show is just bonkers. So I fell off about then. And though the show is silly and Archie Comics have been through a number of different genres and moods and feels when it comes to their comics, I had to let this show go. So when people discuss how weird and crazy and wild it is, though I do have my complaints and my issues with it, I think that this show stayed pretty true to the spirit and the legacy of Archie Comics, because Archie has teamed up with Scooby Doo, Alien, Predator. They've been vampires, zombies, alternate universes. So there's really truly nothing that the Riverdale show has done that is too far removed from Archie Comics. It's just when you sell the show or you make the promise of a dark, gritty reboot, and then you like pivot a hard left and you give us all this other stuff, we can accept it, but that's not the promise that you made to the audience before. But that's not even my biggest issue with the show. What stopped me from watching it, or what had me kind of pull away from it, was the continuity, the treatment of indigenous v- people or imagery of people, or because who the hell knows? Also queer folks and black people. So one of my issues was with continuity. It felt as if you could watch episodes 3, 4, and 5 and everything will make sense, but then once you get to 6, now all of a sudden somebody randomly owns a rocket, and then there's a virus in the school, and then all of the character development that was done in 2 has now been erased. And it got to a point where I know this is a show that you'll probably just have a fun watch, but I was like, oh, this is not fun. I am trying to understand and track the movements of these characters because I'm invested in the show, but you're giving me just anything. And I did not like that. Now, that's something that I probably could have overlooked. But then when it came to the queer characters, i.e., Kevin, there was one scene in particular that really pissed me off. And it was with Betty and Kevin in the woods. And I think Kevin was on some sort of like Riverdale's version of like a gay queer hookup app. And he was meeting people in the woods and sleeping with them, or, hooking up and kissing or whatever you could do with CW. And like she kind of cut into him real deep. And I was like, you put on a black wig and become an entirely different person. And you feel like they were acting as if Kevin was doing something that the rest of the cast wasn't doing, but you weren't portraying his activities and behaviors in the same way. It was such a weird space to be in. And that's like the one example off the top of my head. And there's been many others. I know the Sisters of Quiet Mercy, that was a storyline that I was like, conversion camp? Like when Cheryl was battling with lesbianism and they like sent her to that terrible it's just it was weird. It was weird, and I don't think it was handled well. I think it's I guess you kudos for the attempt, especially in a show like this that is geared towards younger folks, and you're dealing with topics that are handled on other shows much more dramatically. But I think they failed. They failed a lot with that. And then when it came to the black characters, especially, so the guy who Archie was in kid prison with, Mad Dog, that was his name. He was clearly 33. Like it was not 16. And I liked that character, but it was like, you got this underground prison fighting ring between these children. How large is Riverdale? Like you make it seem like it's this small little town with pep, but then it's like in upstate New York, and so it's kind of close to everything, but not. It whatever. It I get the appeal. If you like it, you like it. But there was one storyline in particular that really pissed me off because the show gender bent, not gender bent, race bent a lot of characters. Fine. I'm not one who has an issue with race bending, like, whatever, do it or don't do it, just give us a good story. But when you race bend a character, you have to account for what that racial aspect of this character means to the story at large. So Josie and the Pussycats were race bent. And it's almost as if the show ran out of things for the group to do. And so they wanted to center in on just Josie, played by Ashley Murray. And I liked her as Josie. I liked Josie and the Pussycats. They did not give Melanie and Valerie anything to do. So they were just like hanging around. And then they wrote them off of the show. But then they made it where Josie kind of backstabbed them somewhat. And then Cheryl, again, you got the optics. This white woman did like a single white female onto Josie and like was manipulating her, really gaslighting her, and like doing a lot of shit that was like, I feel like, why go the extra mile to make these characters black only to pretty much write them off? And so they're never to be seen or heard from again. I mean, they came back eventually, I think in season 6, at the top of season 6 for a bit. I checked out. But the way it was handled was so weird. And then even Valerie's brother, he popped up in like one scene and was gone. And again, I'm not saying that every character, just because they're black, they need to have this full blown arc where they're in every single episode. But when you consciously make the decision to make this change, and then you just get rid of them, and then you look at the amount of black people you have on the show, it's like, this really doesn't make any sense. So you've written them off, and so is Josie the only black character in town. Then Jordan Calloway's character, I forget his name, I think it was Chip. But even him, like the handling of him was so weird. And I don't even mean the bully part of him. I mean, when he came back and Robin Givens playing Josie's mom was like cutting into him about pretty much him not being good enough. I'm like, who is this for? What story are you trying to tell? What is the end game of all of this? I just felt like this show handled this ish poorly. So with continuity, and then like the Southsiders, the indigenous, and I won't dive too deeply into that, but I will say, because I'm not indigenous, so I don't want to make it seem as if I'm taking up the cause for someone else when it may not matter to that group of people. But when watching this, the fact that so many things were unclear was an issue. I'm like, okay, are these just like poor people on the South Side? Are these indigenous people? And if they are, like, you're kind of shoehorning in and retconning things, but you're not doing it in a way that makes sense. It was clumsily done. So now, and again, remember, I haven't watched 5 and 6 or 4, 5, and 6. Had no interest, but up to the point of season 3, it was like, what are y'all doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is the true purpose of having these people now be indigenous? Like, is it just for having POCs in the show, or is it like a broader purpose? And if you've watched the entirety of the series and there was more to it, let me know. Put that in the comments. Let me know what's going on. I'm not against learning, but what made me stop was a lot of the treatment of these marginalized characters. And I don't know. It was just weird. So I guess you say, if if you have all those issues, why even return to Riverdale? Well, I'm returning because I feel like it's closing the loop. It is the show that I first reviewed when I first started my podcast. Though I do have my issues with it, it was a comfort show. I enjoyed it. With all this wackiness and over the top, and like sometimes they feel like they're in high school, sometimes they feel like they're in college, but there's also like Veronica opened a full what is that, uh a bar underneath Pops, this damn prohibition bar with like secret beers and drinks, and then they also got superpowers. And then Betty's sister was like in a cult where the twin niece and nephew were like supernatural alien babies, and then like there was a cult that moved in that was like very adjacent to Stranger Things. Like the show is so bonkers. So even though I do have my critiques about it and my issues with it, I find comfort in this show because it is the first show again that I reviewed when I started my podcast, when I started my audio journey. And so I like to return to it. And I'm going to try my best to stick it out. Not making no promises. If they get too wild and crazy, and I'm like, okay, this ain't for me, I'm a bow out. But I'm definitely going to give it the good old college try because I want to see. You've gone back in 1955. I want to see how do you wrap up everything now. Um, this was an interesting show, and I think that it's more than likely going to be a cult classic for years on end. And kudos to the whole team. I hope this is better. I'm not going to sugarcoat any of my issues with the show throughout season 7, but I do want to see like it's like reminiscing with an old friend, somebody you knew back in high school. Y'all move away to college, and you meet up again as adults, and it's like, hey, what's been going on? Let's catch a movie or get something to eat. That's how I feel about Riverdale. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the show has for me, if anything. And seeing how they are treating these characters. I know season 6, I think it was this like big power mutant Avengers level like in-game threat thing where Cheryl had to everyone had superpowers and then Cheryl had to consume the powers of everyone to be like the Phoenix Force. Like that's so wacky. I don't care. I'm with it. I may revisit the entire series one day in the future, but right now I'm really just excited for season 7. So let me know, how do you guys feel about Riverdale? Do you have a similar interaction as I do, where it started off strong and then you got kind of iffy, or are you like die hard? I've been through it since day one and I love it. Let me know. And shout out to the Riverdames. That is a duo who when I first started reviewing Riverdale, we did a couple crossover episodes together discussing this silly ass show. So let me know, are you watching Riverdale this season? Are you going to consume the final season? Are you done with it? Are you like, nah, it ain't for me? Either way, let me know. And then also, like, who's your favorite character? I know there's some new people being introduced who I may not know anything about. I think Kevin's husband from the comics is the young black guy who we see in the trailer when he's at the dancing with Betty. And so, hey, you know me, representation, that's what I'm here for. So thank you all so much for watching. Tune in next time to the next video. We're going to get into some more mess, and be sure to look out for those weekly. I'm going to try to do a live tweet every Wednesday. Check out the show notes for the social medias. I got Twitter, as long as it's still around. CarefreeBlackNerd is my handle. You can follow me there and get into this loud talking, mess talking, meme video posting that I'll be doing for Riverdale season 7. So stay carefree, stay nerdy, stay geeky, and stay in the 1950s, I guess. All right, y'all.
I dropped out in the 4th grade to run drugs to support my nana. That means you have to know the triumphs and defeats, the epic highs and lows of high school football.